Hi, I'm Mike B from the Who Dares Rolls TV, and today we'll be looking at Lifeform from All or Nothing Productions and designer Mark Chaplin to understand my love for Lifeform and the excitement that this box generates in me. I have to step back to September 1979. I was already a fully fledged nerd, having had my fragile mind blown by Star Wars a few years earlier, but it was Alien that truly captured my imagination. Part of it was the horror element, up to then horror being the occasional hammer flick I'd been allowed to stay up late tonight to watch. But there's a world of difference between Peter Cushing brandishing a whittled chair leg at Christopher Lee and what Ridley Scott and Giger had in store for us. And lest we forget that this was a time when information about films was a rare commodity. There was no internet or spoiler-filled trailers to give away the game. One of the few items that spurred my undying interest in the film was small glimpses of the aesthetics, the incredible production design of the Nostromo, all-industrial nightmare and oil-soaked horror house in space, and a couple of pieces of Giger's original art for the creature design. To my tiny sci-fi loving nerd, there was nightmare fuel, something we'd never seen. It was otherworldly and beautiful and terrifying all at once. In fact, this magazine, Fantastic Films, something my dad picked up somewhere, I have no idea where, was mostly one I had to visually stoke my interest. There's a shot in here of Ridley in a PVC rain cover, captioned, that was worn during a particularly bloody scene, painted a more vivid and nightmarish idea of what was coming than any number of making-ofs could. Of course, Alien would become everything it seemed, and more besides, when I eventually settled down on a Sunday night in 1982 for its first UK TV airing.
On Sunday night at 9:30, we travel to the outer reaches of space, where terror is just a heartbeat away.
What has any of this got to do with the game? Well, nothing and everything, as both myself and Mark Chaplin, Lifeform's designer, share very similar upbringings, having indulged ourselves on Hollywood's golden age of nerd cinema growing up. Mark has poured all of this into his love letter to Alien and funky sci-fi of horror of the time, the game you see before you now, Lifeform. Anyway, context is everything, and consider yourself now very, very contexted. So the game, Lifeform, as we've discussed, is the Alien board game you've always wanted, just without the messy and expensive business of licensing. And while it would have been cool to have gotten the actual crew, characters and creature from the film, the game is loaded with enough loving nods to both Alien and many other beloved sci-fi films of the period that this gets a pass for channeling that geek nostalgia that Stranger Things has been dining out on during its 3 seasons. In this video, I'll be reviewing the main game and not the solo experience. There is a solo expansion available to buy, Dragon's Domain, and I'll be filming a separate video for once I've managed to get a couple of games in of it. So that's that to look forward to. So, this is a 1 against minigame for 1 to 4 players, with one player taking the role of the alien killing machine and the remainder the unfortunate meat sacks attempting to escape the ship before it explodes due to the inconvenient triggering of the self-destruct system. Players will be controlling 2 crew each and will be dashing around the board attempting to hoover up these mission tokens and then placing them on the various shuttle loadout systems that are priming the shuttle for launch. Some of these systems have a mandatory point that must be hit in order to launch, and even offer bonuses for the end game if filling above these points. Each player starts with a secret mission that also must be completed before they can launch the shuttle. Player actions are pretty straightforward. On their turn they can do 1 action. They can equip, which allows them to draw more cards into their hand, and they will need cards. However, there is a cost associated with that action. It will advance the self-destruct track. Not good. They can use their heat analyzer. This is essentially a one-time only free card draw. They can activate a crew skill. Again, these are one-time uses and will usually give additional actions. And finally, the most important action is to play a crew card. So the crew cards all have iconography that represents the actions that your crew characters can do, from moving through the ship to interacting with rooms, or even using a flamethrower to piss off the alien. Most of these are pretty obvious, but if in doubt, there is a handy player guide supplied to help. Ta-da! Once all the players have had their actions, it's the Lifeform player's turn, and this is where it gets fun. To simulate the dodgy motion sensors of the crew, the Lifeform player has 2 tokens on the board representing the Star Beast. One is the real alien, and the other is a sensor ghost. The Lifeform player decides which is which before the game begins, and throughout the game these will switch about. The Lifeform player has even fewer actions than the crew. They can lurk, which allows them to draw up to their hand limit. They can use a vent token, which allows them to pop up from anywhere on the ship into one of these red bordered rooms, and then potentially chew one of the crew's faces off. Or they can play a Lifeform card, which again has iconography similar to the crew's but specific to the Lifeform, so moving or attacking, messing with the sensor ghosts, and special options like cocooning, which allows them to increase their hand limit, and then can be maxed if a third sensor ghost appears on the board. Once you're familiar with the game, turns can whip around at a fair clip, and there is this palpable air of tension as the creature stalks the crew as they desperately try to escape and fill the loadout on the shuttle. Anyone who's played Fury of Dracula or Letters from Whitechapel will notice some similarities, and yes, it's another hidden movement game, which I've always loved. What I particularly enjoy about this, and it shares some DNA with Fury, is the antagonist, the creature, the Lifeform, isn't just sneaking around and hiding, it is actively attacking and killing the crew. An important safety point that I haven't mentioned earlier is the creature itself can't be killed. It can be attacked, which will piss it off and make it angry, allowing it to populate the board with these terror tokens. And when a crew member enters a room with one, they pull a card from the terror deck. They are not very nice cards, and you really don't want to do too much of that. Should the crew survive long enough to load the shuttle out and jump aboard, they can launch. But of course, this is a game of survival horror, so there is a possibility that the creature has stowed away on board. And then it's the final battle with a Lifeform, picking one of the crew on the shuttle and attacking them by playing a card. At the bottom of each of the players and Lifeform's cards are these icons that are used now. It's essentially a game of rock, paper, scissors, with the crew trying to match the symbols that the alien is playing to cancel them out. And depending on how well they've loaded the shuttle, they may have extra ways of cancelling the attacks or other bonuses. And should they eventually manage to successfully run out the Lifeform's hand of cards, and have surviving crew, then they finally blast it out the airlock and settle down for a nice nap and some R&R. So that's Lifeform, and it's great. As I mentioned, I love the asynchronous play, and with the stakes so high that the creature can't be killed, it manages to instill that panicked, desperate rush against all the players. With the actions coming thick and fast, there is very little downtime, which makes this a refreshing breath of fresh air. It's a nice touch, is despite that there were character deaths, there isn't player elimination. Should a player lose all their characters, then they can respawn and play as the ship's cat or a benevolent ship's computer, each getting his own separate deck and allowing them to work in a more supportive role to the dwindling but remaining survivors. What I love is how the game is so thematic, with the destruction countdown chiming away, helped if the Lifeform player hams it up a bit by announcing every time it advances. There is this constant manic pressure at the table, and with limited ways of pulling cards, there is this pain look each time someone is forced to draw cards from the deck, forcing that timer to move on. And of course, at certain points on the track, if it's reached, then terror tokens are dropped to the board. There's more advantages for the Lifeform player, and even at certain points it will lock off abilities and skills for the players as it advances towards the final dwindling minutes of the countdown. There are also a bunch of other little touches that I didn't mention in the overview. The ship's homicidal android can be activated, really messing things up, or you can get a hull breach that sees crew members sucked out into space, or you can seal off areas with security doors. I mean, the game is a dread-laden selection box of over-nerdy little references and thematic touches just waiting to be discovered. I've not even seen them all yet myself. It means that each game can play out completely differently, as this stuff won't happen every game, which means it's not a puzzle to be solved. There's this shifting situations and pressure, and I love that variety, that replayability that it puts into the game. On the whole, the components are all pretty solid. Love the board, love the graphic design. The board is a thing of beauty. The oversized player aids missed a trick by not putting on the player actions as a reminder, especially really would be helpful in the first few plays. And I'm not entirely certain that they need to be the size they are. The player boards also seem excessive for the limited point they have in the game, And it just sort of, the game is a bit of a real estate hog anyway, so anything that could have kind of shrunk that table space maybe would have helped. And no minis, which actually is absolutely fine. Sure, a heap of plastic on the board would have aesthetically looked cooler, but the board would have been twice the size it is, and frankly, it isn't that sort of game. If I had one issue, it's the rules. The rulebook is a hefty tome running to about 40 odd pages, and it does contain everything in there to play the game. And after the first read, it mostly makes sense. Mostly. It's once you're playing and you need to check stuff, it kind of falls apart. There are references at the rear of the book, but maddeningly they don't have the rules there often. It's buried in a paragraph that you read earlier relating to another action. And pausing to scan through the book to find them breaks the immersion during a game. It's the one thing about the game that makes it feel like a Kickstarter game. As I've said, everything is here in the book to play, just not necessarily in the place you'd expect it to be. Fortunately, the game's designer Mark is incredibly fast to respond on Facebook or Board Game Geek, and all of my questions were answered pretty quickly. I just love for publishers to go with the FFG route of the 2 rule books that are rolling out the last couple of years. You get one for Get You Playing, and the second one's a reference guide that you can just quickly flick through to find stuff. It's a system that really works really great, and I wish more publishers would take it on. Putting those niggles aside, if you've been waiting for that alien board game, then it's here. I love all the thematic touches layered throughout the game and the little Easter eggs scattered about for you to find. The gameplay is smooth, and most refreshingly, once you're comfortable with the rules, it whips along. And despite the creature being a killing machine, the game does self-balance very well, and it never feels like a punishing experience. Yes, the crew will make stupid mistakes and get eaten, but the play is the right side of desperate, not demoralising, but more invigorating. You know, the only sad thing about this, I wish that this had been available for the 8-year-old me back in '79 to play, because by God I would have played the shit out of this all the time. Now we're adults, I don't get as much time to play these things. So yeah, I regret that. Why wasn't this here? So there you have it. This is one of my games of 2019. Saying it now, I'm stating it now. It's a rollicking thematic ode to Alien, and it comes with our highest recommendation. Keep a lookout for our solo expansion review that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks, and don't forget to subscribe, or even if you're feeling particularly flush, visit our Patreon account. This is Mike B, the last surviving member of Who Dares Rolls TV, signing out.
Danger. The emergency disrupt system is now activated. The ship will detonate in T-minus 10 minutes. The option to override automatic detonation expires in T-minus 5 minutes.